Hi guys, it's Ann Zachary, the creator of the Learn and Grow educational series, and it's been a while since I've done this, but it seemed like now was as good a time as any with everything crazy going on in the world these days. The last time I did this kind of a video, we were going through it as a country in the whole COVID situation and the supply chain disruption, which took food off the shelves, and people were concerned about food security back then. And we sort of got comfortable again. Things started to rebound, and now here we are again because of tariffs and because of just policy decisions now that have led to all kinds of lawless misconduct that is taking our field workers out of our fields and leaving food rotting in the fields, which means there's nothing to be on the shelves in the store very quickly, very soon from now. Now is as good a time as any to get started growing on your own food if you haven't already started. And for those of you who are new to all of this and you're kind of freaking out right now because you're like, oh shoot, what do? I want to first of all give you a little bit of comfort that having a plan is 90% of overcoming the anxiety of the moment, and then carrying it out actually makes you feel pretty empowered. So really what you really need to get yourself started is a plan, and then from there you can move forward in terms of what you want to do. And so I want to share the whole concept of self-watering container gardening with you to give you an understanding of how it all works and how you can make that happen for you. And the reason why I want to focus on self-watering container gardening is because for a lot of folks, you're limited in your ability to grow where you live, because maybe you're a renter and you can't put something in the ground. And what if you have to move and you'll need to be able to take it with you. And so with self-watering containers, you can definitely do that. In fact, it's one of the reasons why I started my self-watering container garden. And then another concern is that I'm terrible at staying on a watering schedule, that I will lose track of when was the last time I watered something, and I won't notice that something needs my attention until it's way too late. And then, it's all crispy, and then I'm flooding it to try and rehabilitate it because I've left it too long, and then I'll overwater it, and then it will of course die, and then it will rot in the soggy soil that I left because I overwatered. So just trusting me to water is a bad idea, and having the self-regulated watering cycle of how the self-watering system actually works, which is it's using the laws of nature. It's actually a permaculture strategy that uses the laws of nature to take care of itself. I can't mess it up. And so that was another big plus for me. And so if you're new to gardening, that's like one of the biggest things to overcome is how much is too much water and how much is not enough. And if you're doing a self-watering system, you don't have to worry about it. The plants will self-regulate their water consumption. And then that actually makes it more water conservative than growing in the ground as well. It's actually 80% more efficient in terms of water consumption. It uses about 80% less water on average than growing in the ground. And part of that is because you're not going to have any water loss leaching away into the earth, that all the water is going to stay where it's at until it's needed. And so it just, only sips it as it goes, and there's no other place for the water to go until it's time. And so you don't have loss. And so you don't have a lot of loss or evaporation either. And so that's an advantage as well as water conservative. And so if you're in a drought prone area, which when I started out, we were in the throes of the drought in Southern California. And so that was a big, huge concern for me as well, was the water conservation piece. And even though at the time as a renter, my water was included with my rent, I wasn't looking to try and, squeeze as much free water out of my landlord as I possibly could. I was still trying to be responsible and water conservative. And so having that water conservation aspect to it is really a big plus as well. And then another thing to think about with these self-watering containers is there's no mechanical parts, there's no electricity needed, there's no pumps, there's no special growing media, there's nothing weird that you need to do special and extra that's going to make you have to buy something ongoing to keep the system going. And there's not a razor and razor blades mentality behind the design at all. So if you know anything about marketing, the whole thing about razor and razor blades is that you give away the razor dirt cheap, but then charge an arm and a leg for the razor blades, because that's where you're really going to make the money. And it's called a consumable. And so, you want to avoid any kind of a gardening strategy that obligates you to keep purchasing supplies from a particular vendor. Like, you can only use their growing medium because that's the only thing that's going to fit into their growing system. They're looking to do the razor and razor blades where they're going to make their money off of you with the consumables and get you stuck into a situation where you've got to continue buying their stuff. And so it's not really about your food independence as much as it's about you creating a new kind of food dependence on a different kind of vendor. It's just another way of capitalism to reach into your pocket when you're trying to address a survival need of feeding yourself. And so for me, that's not really a solution that we would want to promote anyway. And so by doing the self-watering containers, for us, we're utilizing as many recycled materials as we can. And so I'm going to give you an example in just a moment, let you see it up close and personal. Out here, we have recently replaced almost all of our original buckets from when we first started in 2013 with new ones that have been donated to us by a restaurant that would have otherwise just had to throw its buckets into the trash. And they get their cheese in these buckets, totally perfect for self-watering container gardening. And so I got this wonderful relationship with this restaurant now, that she's continuing to give me all of her buckets now that, I've replaced pretty much all of them out here. I really don't need to build out that many more buckets out here, if any at all. But I have opportunities now to do community gardening programs with other organizations and other housing little groups of tenants associations and managers of mobile home parks and apartment complexes, and be able to go in and do community gardens in those spaces and teach the people who live in those spaces how to do the self-watering container gardening and collaborate with each other. And okay, I'm going to grow all the tomatoes, you grow all the beans, or whatever they want to do, mix it all up, and everybody grows a little bit of everything and you just share. But to be able to do that kind of community gardening and help people become more food independent as these times become more trying, and help people get less reliant on the commercialized food supply. For us, it's not about being a doomsday prepper. It's more being afraid of what the doomsday preppers are going to do when they run out of canned goods. Yeah. And, and just otherwise, avoiding that whole scene altogether by simply growing your own food and not being dependent upon the commercialized food supply in general. We consider food independence a basic human right. You shouldn't have to rely on capitalism to survive. And so for us, this is a big deal. And so that's the message behind what we do, and that always has been. When I've told the story in the past, but for those of you who are new to Learn and Grow, back in 2016, Learn and Grow was still relatively new. It had only been around for 3 years. And we had a growing audience on Facebook, but it was mostly in Egypt, of all places, where 94% of the people or 96% of the people live on 4% of the available land because of the water availability, and they're building upward and going more vertical with their building, and that leaves no open ground for growing as more and more people are living in high rises and whatnot. But everybody's got a little balcony of some sort. And so doing the self-watering container gardening in that space is actually, or rooftop gardening and those kinds of things, is really a viable option. And so it took off there. And so that was where a lot of our focus was at that time, because that's where people were really the most interested in what we had to say. And then all of a sudden we started getting all kinds of crazy traffic in 2016 from Venezuela. And so by looking at our back end traffic and seeing the uptick in traffic from that part of the world, like, what the heck is going on in Venezuela? And lo and behold, their economy was crashing, and all of a sudden their socialized system of grocery stores and whatnot, all of their retail was subsidized through their socialized way of doing their economy. And when the economy collapsed and the socialized government collapsed because of it, there was no food in the stores, and all of a sudden people were desperately looking for ways to grow their own food. And at the time, they were still ordering from Amazon and having it delivered, but then after a while, the people who were in charge would just seize everybody's food shipments at the airport, and it would make it to the palaces, but never make it to the people who ordered it. And things really went south from there, and it got really dark and sad. But we were able to push a lot of content and instructional content out, and we were able to create content in Spanish that reached reached that audience at a time when they really needed it, and got a lot of really moving messages back from people. One in particular that we got over Facebook from a gentleman who lived in a high-rise apartment in Caracas with no open ground for growing and had no idea what he was going to do, and then saw that he could build out self-watering containers with just buckets and whatever he had on hand, and was like, oh my God, I'm saved, and was so grateful. And so that's kind of the concept that we're looking to share, is like, whatever your situation is, you should be food independent, at least partially, so that you're not 100% dependent upon the commercialized food supply. And so that's what I want to focus on with this video today, is just reorienting back to where we started at the very beginning with Learn and Grow. Just not just the sustainability piece, which is certainly, our bigger overall message, but just to focus on the food security piece of it, where we started in the very, very beginning with our self-watering containers. We're going to start back with there today, especially for those of you who are new to all of this and are just now embarking upon your gardening journey and are looking for something that's going to be easy and quick and affordable, and if necessary, portable. And even if you're not looking to pick up your garden and move with you, if you need to be able to rearrange it because you have limited light availability in the space that you have to work with, and you may need to move your containers to follow the sun throughout the seasons, that's something that you can achieve, with this method as well. So hang tight. In the next piece you're going to see here, I'm going to be giving you a demo and showing you how we do this. Okay, I'm going to show you guys one of the easiest ways to do a self-watering container, and it's to use a wick, a fabric wick. And this is like a big old bundle of wicking rope that's made specifically for this purpose that I got off of Amazon, and I can include links below if you want to check it out. But you don't actually have to use something like this. I did buy it just to check it out, and it works great. But I have been just as successful using strips of old nylon stockings, or like an old nylon petticoat that I used to wear back in the 80s and the 90s. It was at the bottom of my drawer, and I'm like, I'm never going to wear this again. And so I just shredded it into strips and turned them into wicks for self-watering containers, because that nylon is not going to break down, and it'll wick water forever. And so I'm going to use just a length of this wicking rope as the wick material for this self-watering container build that I'm doing. And I'm actually going to be building out 2 containers, so this is actually just the length that I'm going to use for one of them. What I'm going to be using are 2 of these queso buckets from the local restaurant. And one of the things I like about them is the grooves that go along the side, because if you put them in here cockeyed to each other, now one is elevated much higher up, and you've got a way more space down below for water, for your reservoir. So that's how this is going to work, is you're going to have the lower bucket be your water reservoir, and your upper bucket's going to have the soil and the plants and everything growing in it. And so being able to position this so that it's higher up gives you more space to put water down here in the reservoir, and that wick can just dangle down into it all the way to the bottom and convey it all the way up into the soil in the upper chamber, and keep that sub-irrigated self-watering thing going all by itself, just using the laws of nature, just laws of physics. So what we got to do is drill some holes in these buckets to make them facilitate all of that. So pretty simple stuff. So with this, now here's the thing, is that once you put soil in here, and depending on how big and heavy the plant gets, the weight of it as it increases in mass can create downward pressure on this, and this thing can actually shove and settle down, I've learned over time, into the bucket and sink deeper into it. And so sometimes it'll sink down so far that like only this part of it is sticking out right here, like just this bit of it. And so, but bearing that in mind, that this could go further down, you still want your drain holes far enough down that if this settles, it's not going to block it. It's not going to get in front of the hole and help and prevent the water from draining out properly. You want at least 1/4 of an inch of gap of air between the surface of the water at its fullest and the underside of your upper chamber, because you're going to need space for water to drip out of the soil and into the water reservoir down below if the soil becomes too damp, like if it rains or whatever. You want that water to pass through, and then you need a drain hole so that if the reservoir gets overfilled, it has an overflow hole so that the excess can come out. So you definitely either want this sitting on some kind of a pan if you're going to do it in an indoor space, space where the flooring matters, or out on the ground where it's not going to matter, where it spills out. Any excess water comes out of the drain hole. It's not going to mess anything up. So just bear that in mind. So what we're going to do first is drill our drain hole. And I would say the bottom of this is coming to right about here, but with the understanding that it could settle down like by another 1.5 inches, quite easily if it gets like laden with soil and roots and big heavy plants. So we want to drop down a little bit more, and then 1/4 inch below that. And so this is where I'm going to drill the reservoir drain hole. And this is still plenty of reservoir space for the water in here. It's going to be plenty of water in the reservoir to last it for quite some time. So you don't need the reservoir to be super, super deep. And there's the drain hole. So that was easy enough. Ta-da! So now what we need to do, setting that aside, is we need to drill up the bottom of this. So we need to have a bunch of little drain holes for the excess water to drain into the reservoir, but then we also need to have holes for the wick to go through. So that's what we're going to do next, is the holes on the bottom of this. As you can see, there's not a whole lot to this. That was like one hole that had to be drilled there. Bunch of holes I'm going to drill here. It'll take like, a minute or two. And then thread the wick through. And Bob's your uncle, I'm done. I've built a self-watering container. So check it out. Okay. So there's all the drilling that I need to do for this. Now there's going to make lots of little nibbly bits that need to be cleaned up and whatnot that you don't want falling into your stuff, and you don't want them landing on the ground. So be sure to clean up after yourself with these little bits. But doing it this way, it's not like the other method that we do with the hole saw and cutting a big hole for an atrium drain, another hole for a piece of PVC to pass through as the refill tube. And this is another benefit of using these buckets with these grooves in them, is that now that I've got all this put together, not only do these grooves help hold it up, but now I have a refill area. I can just shoot water into the side down one of these grooves and it goes straight into the reservoir. I don't need to take up any real estate inside the bucket by adding a piece of PVC to be the refill tube. We've got little areas on the side that go straight down to the bottom, and it helps aerate everything and keep the air circulation going, but it's not going to really facilitate a lot in terms of evaporation. And then you've got your drain holes in here. So now what we need to do is string through the wick. And so I'm just pushing this through using the scissors that I cut the string with to push it through the hole so I can grab it on the other side and pull it through. And it's not going to have to hang down that far to get to the bottom of the bucket. And we don't need that much of it sticking all the way up here into the soil. So what I'm going to do is basically create a double dangle situation where the string actually loops up into the soil. I'll show you how I do it in just a second. I just need to poke this back down through this other hole that I drilled. There we go. So now what you can see is I've got this loop in here of this string, and when I fill it with soil's going to go under the loop and around it and over it, so that the water is being wicked up into the soil, but it's dangling down into this reservoir, which will have water in it all the way up to the point of the drain hole, which is right here. And those little danglies are coming down but well below that. They're like laying on the floor of the thing at this point. And if this shoves down anymore, they'll just go even further down in there and lay on the floor, but the loop will still be up in the soil, conveying all the moisture up into the soil from down below. And that's all you got to do. and laws of physics will take over from there. And what's called capillary action is the process where the air gaps that are already in the wick and in the soil will attract water molecules, and water molecules want to stick to each other and make larger droplets instead of being little, misty particles. And so they'll all come together and glom together in the open spaces and the air pockets in the soil and in the weave of the wick material. And in doing that, that's how absorption works. And so the capillary action is that the action that absorption engages in to pull the water up into the thread, up into the fabric, and then convey it up into the soil, which then absorbs it further. And then once the roots of your plants are established in particular, then they will start to suck the water out of the soil. And whenever they drink the water out of the soil dries out. It absorbs more from the thread, more comes up from below, and so the plant actually regulates how quickly it's consuming the moisture that's down in the reservoir. And so this is how you do a self-watering container. Pretty simple. So I hope that really helps you understand how you can make your own self-watering container, and you don't have to do it exactly the way that I did it. The important thing to understand is that you need a reservoir of water down below with adequate drainage so it can overflow if it gets too full, with a gap of air between the surface of the water and the underside of your growing chamber, adequate drainage for the moisture in the soil to be able to drain back down, and then some kind of wicking mechanism, a piece of fabric that's not going to rot, or a piece of wicking rope, or whatever you can find that's going to work for you that way. Another way you can do it is anything that acts like a little basket that can hang down into the water with a little bit of the soil in it. You can do that too. And so that as long as you've got the soil getting its toes wet in the water, but there's still adequate drainage otherwise, so that it's not sitting all the way down in the water, all of it, then you can make it work. All you need is some way for the water to absorb upward from that reservoir into your growing chamber, and you can be creative in coming up with whatever wicking mechanism might work best for you given what materials you might have on hand. And the same thing with containers. Like, we're using these buckets from the restaurant because that's what we have. I started out with 5-gallon buckets that I actually bought mostly at the store, and that was expensive. And now this time around, even though they're smaller containers, I can still grow quite a few things in here, and I have more of them, and so I can have more containers with more different things in them than having the bigger containers with multiple things in them. And I still am able to grow plenty of things in all of these new self-watering containers that I've made this way with these particular kinds of buckets. And I like that there's no additional hardware needed for the refill thing, that you could just refill the water from the side. So very cool stuff. So hopefully that helps you. And if you go to any kind of Mexican, South American, Central American, it's an Salvadoran restaurant that we get these from, but I've also seen them at a local Mexican restaurant as well, Queso Fresco. I think pretty much every restaurant around Southern California that serves some kind of Latino food is probably getting Queso Fresco in these buckets, and otherwise has to chuck them in the landfill if they're not going to find some other use for them. So these aren't the only kinds of buckets that are out there. There are lots of other kinds of, like, pickle buckets are like 5-gallon buckets. I've gotten soy sauce and cooking oil buckets from Panda Express before. And so lots of different restaurants get their supplies in these buckets and will happily give them to you rather than have to throw them in the trash or even pay a fee to have them removed. And it is a free source for you that's otherwise quite expensive to get food safe buckets at the store. So just food for thought that way too, as you're trying to be creative and find your ways to grow your own food in these trying times that we're now all having to deal with right now. Every little cost-saving measure can make a difference. And so just something else to consider is, try to get your buckets for free and use whatever you already have on hand for your materials if you can. And best of luck to you. And I'm interested to see what all the rest of you come up with and how you apply this method of gardening in your own situation. So see you in the next video. Take care. Thanks so much.